The email had landed like a punch to the gut. Urgent. Tuition payment issue. Action required. My heart dropped, a cold dread spreading through my chest. I knew instantly what it meant. Just a week earlier, I'd been on top of the world. My name is Ivy, and at 28 I'd finally gotten accepted into the PhD program at Northwood University. My dream program. It felt like years of grinding, of late nights and early mornings, had finally paid off. Then the refund check arrived. $15,000. It was an overpayment from my student loans, meant to cover living expenses, research materials, everything I'd need to finally focus entirely on my studies. I remember holding that check, feeling a surge of pure, unadulterated relief. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. That's when Marshall called. My brother Marshall is 31. He's always been the creative one, which in our family translates to the one who needs constant financial bailouts. His latest venture? A groundbreaking synth-pop album that apparently required a new recording studio, a professional mixing engineer, and a PR team. All of which he'd already committed to, naturally, without any actual money. Mom, Elizabeth, 56, called me first, her voice dripping with that familiar blend of concern and thinly veiled demand. Ivy, your brother is on the cusp of something big. This is his moment. Dad, Sylvester, 58, got on the line next, cutting straight to it. It's just a temporary loan, Ivy. For family. You'll get it back. This is what's best for Marshall's future. For our family's future. He always framed Marshall's failures as collective burdens, and his potential successes as collective triumphs. My money, my future, was just a small necessary sacrifice. I watched the money transfer from my account to Marshall's the next day. $15,000, gone. My parents acted like it was a minor inconvenience, a temporary reallocation. They barely looked at me when they talked about Marshall's big break, their eyes shining with a pride they'd never once shown for any of my academic achievements. I was just the reliable one, the one who could always pick up the slack, the one who didn't need anything because I was so capable. I felt invisible, erased. The silence from them was deafening, until the university registrar's email popped up on my phone screen a few days later. Subject: urgent. Tuition payment issue. Action required. My tuition payment had bounced. The call from the registrar's office confirmed it. My tuition hadn't just bounced, it was gone. Completely. When I called my parents, Elizabeth's voice was clipped, impatient. Well, Ivy, it's just not meant to be right now, is it? Marshall needs this. You're so smart, you'll figure something else out. Maybe take a year off? Drop out gracefully. Drop out gracefully. That phrase echoed a lifetime of being told to step aside, to make room, to be the sensible one. When I was 10, I won a regional science fair, but the family celebrated Marshall's brave decision to try out for the school play, even though he didn't get a part. When I got into my top choice undergrad, the conversation at dinner was about Marshall's latest band breaking up and how he needed support. It was always Marshall. Always. I called Sawyer, my best friend since freshman year of college. She's 29, a PhD candidate in my department, and the only person who truly sees through my family's BS. Ivy, you have to fight this, she urged, her voice tight with indignation. This is your future. They can't just take your money. I wanted to scream, to rage, but the words stuck in my throat. Fighting them head-on felt like slamming into a brick wall I'd been hitting my whole life. Instead, I swallowed the bitter pill. I found a research assistant position at the university, a temporary gig that would at least keep me on campus, keep me connected. It wasn't the PhD, not yet, but it was a foothold. It was a way to stay. And it was a way to watch. A few days after I started the research job, a notification popped up on my phone. Marshall had posted on social media. A glossy photo of him in a recording studio, a caption gushing about investing in the future of education and giving back to the community that shaped me. He even tagged Northwood University. And there, in the comments, he'd replied to someone asking how he could afford it. Just made a significant donation, 15 grand, to help out the next generation of artists. 15 grand. My 15 grand. That Sunday, at our usual family dinner, the air was thick with a forced cheerfulness. My parents barely acknowledged my presence, their attention solely on Marshall, who was holding court about his philanthropy. He kept glancing at me, a smug, knowing look on his face. Halfway through the meal, my father raised his glass. To Marshall, he boomed, for his generosity, for his vision, for investing in something truly important. My mother Elizabeth beamed, her eyes welling up. To Marshall's big heart, she added, her gaze pointedly avoiding mine. They toasted him. With my money, starting as a research assistant felt like a demotion, a public acknowledgement of my failure. I saw my old classmates in the hallways, the ones who were now officially PhD candidates, and I'd duck into a side corridor or pretend to be engrossed in my phone. The shame was a constant low hum beneath my skin, but the work itself was a distraction. I was good at it, meticulous and efficient. Professor Gabriel Chapman, my new mentor, noticed. He's 40, sharp, and doesn't miss much. He'd often stop by my desk, asking insightful questions about my research, nodding approvingly at my findings. It was a small comfort, a reminder that I still had value, even if my family didn't see it. One afternoon, I ran into Vada Newman, 33, in the university cafeteria. She used to be a contact in the local music scene, someone Marshall always tried to impress. Now she was the university's event coordinator. We exchanged pleasantries, and she mentioned an upcoming admissions mixer, a big splashy event designed to impress potential donors and new students. It's going to be a huge networking opportunity, she said, almost as an aside. I filed that away. The real sting came from Marshall's increasing presence on campus. He wasn't just boasting online. He was showing up to local music events held at Northwood, dropping names, and implying he was some kind of official patron. I even heard him tell a local band that he got Ivy into the university and helped her out with her fees. The audacity was breathtaking. He was using my academic credentials, my hard-earned acceptance, to inflate his own status. Sawyer caught me fuming in the library one day. "You know he's telling everyone he's the reason you're even here, right?" she asked, her voice low and furious. "He's saying he donated to make sure you got in, like he's some kind of benevolent benefactor." I just nodded, my jaw tight. It was worse than I thought. He wasn't just taking my money, he was twisting the narrative, making himself the hero of my story. Then came the final gut-wrenching blow. I was walking past my parents' house, on my way back from the university, when I overheard my mother talking to a neighbor over the fence. "Oh yes, Marshall's doing so well," Elizabeth was saying, her voice bright and proud. "He made a truly generous donation to the university. $15,000, you know. He's always been so civic-minded." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a family secret anymore. It was a public lie, a performance, and they were all in on it. My mother, my father, Marshall. They were actively propagating this fiction, building Marshall up on the ruins of my academic dreams. And they were proud of it. The overheard conversation cemented it. This wasn't just about my money anymore. It was about their deliberate humiliation, their active participation in Marshall's lie. My shame curdled into something colder, sharper. My research assistant job gave me access to the university's internal systems, specifically the donor database and admissions records. It wasn't hard to find Marshall's supposed donation entry. It was there, a line item for $15,000, attributed to Marshall Weber, arts patron. But the payment method was listed as a direct bank transfer from my old account, and the supporting documentation for his patron status was flimsy at best. A few forged letters of recommendation from non-existent music industry contacts, and a fabricated portfolio of his philanthropic endeavors. It was a mess, amateurish, but just convincing enough for someone not looking too closely. I started making more frequent trips to the dean's office, ostensibly for research materials. Dean Melina Jordan, 48, was a no-nonsense woman, sharp as a tack. She had a reputation for being incredibly astute, and I noticed her eyes narrowed slightly whenever Marshall's name came up in casual conversation, which it did increasingly often. He was becoming a local fixture, basking in the glow of his supposed generosity. "This Marshall Weber fellow," she remarked to me one day, "he's quite the talk of the town. Odd, though. I don't recall meeting him at any of our major donor events." I just offered a non-committal hum, letting the seed of suspicion plant itself. The admissions mixer Vada mentioned was approaching fast. Marshall was practically living on campus, rehearsing an acceptance speech for some imagined award at the event. I saw him in a quiet corner of the auditorium, practicing his grandiose gestures, talking about giving back. My resentment deepened, a bitter taste in my mouth. I wrestled with the anger, the shame of being so easily dismissed by my own family. But beneath it, a plan was starting to form, a quiet surgical precision taking shape in my mind. Then, I found it. Tucked away in the digital files of Marshall's donation paperwork, a scanned signature. It wasn't Marshall's, it was my father's, Sylvester Weber, on a letter attesting to Marshall's good character and financial standing. He hadn't just known, he'd been an active participant in the fraud. My parents weren't just complicit. They were co-conspirators. Finding my father's signature on Marshall's fake paperwork was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just Marshall being entitled. It was a full-blown family operation. The cold anger that had been simmering finally solidified into resolve. They wanted a public performance? They were going to get one. I started by subtly nudging Marshall towards the admissions mixer. I casually mentioned to Vada that Marshall was a huge fan of the university and really wanted to connect with the dean. Vada, ever the professional, saw an opportunity for a high-profile donor appearance. She sent Marshall an official invitation, positioning him as an honored patron. He ate it up, of course, already planning his outfit and what grand pronouncements he'd make. With Veda's help, I ensured the event would have maximum visibility. I suggested inviting local media, reminded her to send out a wide net of alumni invitations, and confirmed that Dean Jordan would be giving the keynote address. I even made sure my parents received a special invitation, knowing they wouldn't miss Marshall's moment in the spotlight for anything. The stage was set. A memory flashed through my mind, sharp and painful. I was 15, Marshall 18. He'd crashed Dad's car, totaled it, but swore me to secrecy. "Don't tell Mom and Dad, Ivy," he'd pleaded, his voice whiny. "You'll ruin everything. We have to protect the family name." Dad had found out anyway, but instead of punishing Marshall, he'd just looked at me, cold and disappointed. "You should have told us, Ivy. You're part of this family. You protect us." It was always about protecting Marshall, protecting their image, at my expense. I needed one more piece of evidence. I called my parents, pretending to be concerned about Marshall's nervousness for the mixer. "He's worried about all the attention," I said, fishing. "What if someone asks about the donation? Will he be okay?" My mother, Elizabeth, immediately jumped in. "Oh, don't be silly, Ivy. He just needs to be confident. Tell them he's invested in the arts, that he believes in Northwood. Your father and I will be there to support him. Just stick to the story. Marshall will be fine." My father, Sylvester, chimed in. "It's for the family, Ivy. Marshall knows what to say. Just make sure you're there to back him up." I recorded the call, every word. Later that week, I went to their house. Marshall was out. My mother was in the kitchen, humming. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet. About the mixer. About Marshall's donation. You know it was my money, right? Her humming stopped. She turned, her face hardening. Ivy, don't be ridiculous. It was a loan. A temporary thing. You're not going to ruin Marshall's future over this, are you? Not now, when he's finally getting somewhere. Her eyes pleaded, but it wasn't for me. It was for him. The night of the mixer arrived, a crisp autumn evening. The main hall of the university's arts building was buzzing, filled with students, faculty, alumni, and local dignitaries. I was ostensibly working logistics, which meant I had a perfect vantage point. I watched as Dean Jordan circulated, a picture of calm authority. Vada was everywhere, making sure everything ran smoothly. My parents, Elizabeth and Sylvester, arrived, dressed to the nines, their eyes scanning the room, already preening for Marshall's grand entrance. And then he arrived. Marshall, 31, swaggering in a hideous custom-made tracksuit emblazoned with his new artist logo, looking utterly ridiculous but utterly convinced of his own importance. He loved the spotlight, soaking up every glance, every whispered comment. He immediately made a beeline for a group of local music producers, launching into a loud, exaggerated story about his philanthropy. My parents spotted him, their faces lighting up with pride, and moved to join him, positioning themselves strategically near the stage. I made sure I was near the main exit, a subtle barrier that would make it difficult for them to make a quick escape. My heart was a drum in my chest, a mix of cold dread and exhilarating anticipation. This was it. Dean Jordan finished her opening remarks, a concise speech about the university's commitment to fostering talent. As she stepped down, I moved, catching her eye. Dean Jordan, I said, my voice clear but quiet enough to not draw immediate attention. Before you go, I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to properly thank Marshall Weber for his incredibly generous donation. He's right over there. I gestured subtly towards Marshall, who was now holding court with my parents, beaming. The dean's eyes, sharp and intelligent, flickered to Marshall, then back to me. A flicker of recognition, a question in their depths. She nodded slowly, a slight, almost imperceptible shift in her posture. I then pulled out my phone, subtly dialing Marshall. He answered, his voice loud and boisterous, clearly expecting a congratulatory call. I put him on speaker, holding the phone casually by my side. Marshall, I said, my voice sweet and innocent. I just wanted to call and say how amazing it is that you're here tonight. It's so inspiring. Your commitment to the university. Can you tell everyone here a bit more about your contribution? You know, the one you made to help out the next generation of students? Marshall stumbled. His confident swagger faltered. He looked at me, then at the dean, then at our parents, his eyes wide with a sudden dawning panic. My contribution? He stammered, his voice suddenly thin. Well, just supporting the arts. For the students. He started to sweat, his eyes darting around the room. The dean stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Mr. Weber, she interjected smoothly, her voice calm but penetrating. Perhaps you could clarify the nature of this significant donation. We always appreciate transparency. Guests nearby started to murmur, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Something was definitely wrong. Marshall's face went from pale to beet red in seconds. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between me, the dean, and our parents. It was a gift, he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. A personal gift, from me to the university, to help out Ivy, my sister. Dean Jordan's voice remained calm, almost dangerously so. A gift, Mr. Weber? Our records show a transfer from an account belonging to Ms. Ivy Weber, and the supporting documentation for your patron status appears to be fabricated. She held up a tablet, displaying the digital files I'd uncovered, including my father's signature. Furthermore, the university has a strict policy against fraudulent claims of donation, especially when tied to student enrollment. It was like a switch flipped. Marshall erupted. "You did this!" he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You set me up! You're just jealous, Ivy, because I'm finally making something of myself." His voice cracked, echoing through the suddenly silent hall. My mother, Elizabeth, rushed forward, her face a mask of horror and fury. "Marshall, darling, no! Ivy, what have you done? This is your brother. You're ruining everything." My father, Sylvester, stepped up beside her, his face grim. "Ivy, this is unacceptable. You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing the family." They tried to physically shield Marshall, to usher him away. But it was too late. The damage was done. Dean Jordan simply raised a hand, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. and Mrs. Weber, I understand this is distressing. However, the university takes matters of fraud very seriously." She nodded to two security guards who had quietly appeared. "Mr. Weber, I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to leave, and we will be conducting a full investigation into these documents." Marshall was still screaming, incoherent accusations tumbling from his lips as the security guards gently but firmly escorted him towards the exit. My parents, their faces ashen, stood frozen, caught in the stares of their social circle, their friends, their neighbors. The whispers started, then grew louder. The humiliation was palpable. A thick, suffocating cloud. I stood there, silent. I watched it all unfold, the destruction I had so meticulously orchestrated. There was no triumph, no wild surge of vindication, just a strange hollow numbness. It was done. The lie was exposed. The family name, which they had so desperately tried to protect, was irrevocably tarnished. And I, the quiet, underestimated daughter, had been the one to do it. Later that night, an email landed in my inbox. Subject: "Congratulations, lecturer position." It was from Professor Chapman, formally offering me a full-time lecturer position, effective immediately. A promotion. But my phone was silent. No calls, no texts from my parents. The bridge was burned. And the next morning, a few old friends, mutual acquaintances of Marshall's, sent me accusatory messages. "How could you do that to your own brother? What kind of person are you?" The cost was already becoming clear. It had been a few months since the mixer. The leaves outside my new office window had turned from vibrant green to crisp gold, then fallen, leaving the branches bare against the winter sky. I was now a full-time lecturer, the youngest in the department. My office was small, but it was mine, filled with my books and the quiet hum of my own thoughts. Sawyer was still my rock, my only true family. We'd grab coffee between classes, and she'd listen patiently as I processed the fallout. My phone remained silent from my parents, a void that was both painful and surprisingly liberating. The few old friends who had sided with Marshall eventually faded away, their judgment a small price to pay for the quiet peace I now felt. I saw the article online, buried deep in the local news section. Local music philanthropist faces investigation, career in tatters. It detailed Marshall's fraudulent claims, the university's official statement, and the subsequent collapse of his music career. He'd tried to rebrand again, of course, but the scandal had stuck. There was also a subtle mention of his parents, the prominent local couple, facing unforeseen social challenges. I imagined my mother, Elizabeth, no longer able to hold her head high at garden parties, my father, Sylvester, stripped of his carefully constructed image. There was no joy in it, not really, just a quiet understanding that consequences eventually catch up to everyone. The loneliness was real, a dull ache sometimes, but it was a clean loneliness, untainted by the constant pressure to shrink myself, to make excuses, to sacrifice. I was finally breathing my own air, making my own choices. The autonomy was a powerful, intoxicating feeling. Professor Chapman stopped by my office one afternoon, a printed paper in his hand. "Ivy," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "This is excellent. Your first publication. A strong start to what I'm sure will be a very distinguished academic career." It was a small technical paper, but it was mine, earned through my own hard work, not someone else's deception. A few weeks later, I ran into Dean Jordan in the hallway. She paused, her gaze steady and direct. "Ms. Weber," she said, her voice low, "I wanted to thank you for your integrity. It's not always easy, but it is always right." She gave me a slight knowing nod, then continued on her way. Some investments pay off in unpredictable ways. The $15,000 was gone, but what I'd gained was immeasurable.